The Seven Years' War was the first global war, spanning 5 continents, and all major powers of Europe were involved. When European colonial empires were still in their baby phases, except for the Americas, um, the Seven Years' War happened. Yay! To oversimplify, the French and English were looking at the Ohio Valley and wondering whose it was. They both said that it's theirs at the same time. The French said, "You know what? I'll just slip some forts right here." The British sent a very unknown officer by the name of George Washington, I believe. It's pretty hard to pronounce, I've never heard of him. Along with some colonial militia. Washington led a group of colonial militia natives to build some forts in the Ohio Valley to cement the British claim. However, he stumbled upon Fort Duquesne, French. It went a little something like this. "Mate, this is English territory. What you doing here? Greetings, Englishmen. It is a nice day today. From this nice French fort in a French territory, in a French day. You what, mate?" And that's how the war in the colonies started. But it's American history class, so it's only natural we look at Europe, because there's all another reason the war started. In Europe, to make it simple, the War of Austrian Succession occurred when Frederick II of Prussia questioned the Holy Roman Empire's claims to Hungary, Croatia, Bohemia, and most importantly, Austria. He then declared war on Austria. He's supported by Sweden and a bunch of other countries. Sweden, France, and a bunch of other countries. I'll have to edit that. While Austria was supported by the UK. Austria lost and ceded the area of Silesia to Prussia. But the treaty that ended the war left Prussia's ally, France, out of the picture, making them a bit mad, so they would later align with the Treaty of Versailles. Back to the Americas. The English had major defeats from 1754 to 1755, save their victory in Acadia. In different colonies, the war in India was raging. The British East India Company was the dominant power in the area, but the French East India Company were fairly big, so the British and East India Company waged economic war with them until the Seven Years' War, where they waged actual war. Back in Europe, Austria wanted Silesia back, France wanted to rival English colonial power, and Russia wished to conquer East Prussia. So, to avoid being surrounded on all sides, Prussia invaded the Electric of Saxony, sparking the official start of the Seven Years' War. It was on between the Convention of Westminster, comprising of the English and the Prussians, and the Treaty of Versailles, comprising of France, Austria, and Russia. The English luck in the Americas was turning round, mostly because the British government was pouring money into the theater. In 1757, the French and British did a joint attack against Prussia. However, Prussia held their ground and defeated the Austrians and French at Saxony. However, lost Silesia back to Austria. Meanwhile, Sweden found weakness in Prussia and wanted to retake land they lost in the Pomeranian War. Prussia was now met with enemies at all sides, and as an Austrian offensive was met with failure, and the Russians took Prussia's eastern territories, Prussia was obviously in a bad place. The colonies, the British won at the Battle of Louisbourg, signaling the beginning of the end for the French. But this meant the UK was using almost all its resources in war in the Americas, and like a Mercy exclusively using her abilities to buff a bastion, Prussia was losing the point. And in 1759 seemed to be the end of Prussia. When the Austrians and Russians almost took Berlin, but in a miracle, Austrians and Russians just didn't. I guess they left the stove on or something. Meanwhile, France's indecisive attitude between Europe and the colonies meant they were losing both because of it. Meanwhile, the British and French had to fight a war at sea for naval supremacy. Fleets of both nations were so large they could fight their naval battles all around the globe. It became a vicious cycle. The nation with more ships could defend their trade routes to get money to buy more ships. In the Americas, the UK pushed the French out of Canada by taking Quebec and Montreal, meaning France lost its foothold in the Americas and any chance of a comeback. Meanwhile, in 1760 to 1762, the war in Europe slowed down. So in the meantime, let's talk about India. The French wanted to become the predominant company in the region, and so when the nation went to war, so did the companies. Most of the fighting took place in the south of India, and the British, with their powerful navy and military discipline, seized many French settlements, and the war in India climaxed when the British took over the French East Indias Company, capital of Wandiwash in 1761. Meanwhile, the French continued to lose the war at sea, meaning that they were losing in the cycle I described earlier. And without supply lines, there's no money, which means they couldn't replenish their navy, and they lost more supply lines, and lose more money, and since money is needed for an army too, they lost the war. The more they lost the war at sea, the more they lost the war at land. Meanwhile, in Europe, Prussia was doing quite well when Russian Queen Elizabeth died to one of history's most notorious killers, health complications. In 1762, Peter III succeeded Elizabeth, and he was basically Frederick's number one fan, meaning he was happy to sign the Treaty of St. Petersburg, which would have Russia withdraw from the war. Shortly thereafter, the Treaty of Hamburg was signed, allowing Sweden to make its exit from the war as well. However, the Treaty of Versailles' cause was not yet lost, as Spain entered the war in 1762, under Charles III. However, Spain targeted Portugal, who had been very neutral up to this point, but Spain wanted all of Hispania, because it just seemed like the right thing to do. Portugal was still recovering from the devastating Lisbon earthquake, and put most of their funds into recovering and not into military spending, making it seem like a prime target for Spain. This war would be dubbed the Fantastic War because the French and Spanish troops had a lot of numbers and succumbed to the greatest military weapon of all time: disease, low morale, and hunger. And even though Spain was now at war with the UK, they couldn't stop the British dominance in North America. However, in South America, the Spanish and Portuguese colonies would be fighting a hard war. The Portuguese had to play a game of strategy, avoiding battles and lowering Spanish morale. They'd lose territory, but not lose the war. France decided to turn the war around by attacking Britain directly, but the expensive French fleet was annihilated in the English Channel before it could get even halfway to Britain. With their fleets destroyed, France lost the war at sea. Now with Sweden and Russia out of the war, Spain busy with Portugal, and France crippled, Prussia turned toward Austria, who had defeated in multiple battles in 1762. The war ended with the Treaty of Paris, but Prussia's war ended with the Treaty of Hubertusburg, with pre-war conditions restored. So, later in the Treaty of Paris, aforementioned Treaty of Paris, not the one that ended the American Revolution, there are a lot of treaties of Paris, Britain and France also made peace. Except for the crippled economies, devastated nations, and million dead people, the pre-war conditions were restored. Yay! With their victory, Prussia cemented its position as a great power of Europe. Heck, it cemented the Germans as a great power, which would come back into official world wars, which would definitely change the world. Meanwhile, France began in a rapid decline, culminating in the French Revolution. In the colonies, France gave up its New World colonies and its colonies in India. The British debts led to new taxes in the colonies, and we all know how this story ended. The 7 Years' War was the first global war, and its effects were the same as one. Without France to rival their colonial power, Britain soon became to dominate most of the world. The war is why Britannia rules the waves, and the sun never sets on the British Empire exists. And possibly why I'm not speaking to you in French. So, it should be a big part of curriculum, right? But it's not lived on as epic global conflict, but as a reason for the American and French Revolution, and nothing more. But I think it's way cooler than those two conflicts. It decided the world's fate to British colonialism. It led to the American and French revolutions, which would change world ideas. The French Revolution led to the rise of Napoleon, which would change Europe forever. It meant we will now think of Canadians as British, not French. It gave the British the territory east of the Ohio River, so in the subsequent other Treaty of Paris, that ended the American Revolution, gave the U.S. the starter kit for its soon-to-come manifest destiny. Plus, it's a world war with sailboats and redcoats. What more do you want? Wait, why the anime memes? Well,